Asked me what language are people speaking, and I chose Australian.
Banana Republic.
Okay, welcome everyone to, what month are we in? September.
Apparently.
September already. Okay, welcome to the September 2025 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. Now, I think it's been a while since the three of us have been in a room together.
It's been a while.
Yeah, a few months.
Yep.
And I think, Yaron said he'll try to join, but he was in peak hour traffic. So I think the chances of him making an appearance are probably getting lower and lower the longer he's. Perfect timing. I summoned him and he appears.
You're pro.
Hello.
Hey, hello.
Hey. Howdy.
Yeah. So we've got a fairly straightforward agenda this month. But the reason why it's kind of simple is there's the potential for complexity in the main topic, depending on what paths we go down. But we can keep it simple. There's probably a few areas that maybe we need to dig into a bit further. But just for anyone who's joining for the first time, we'll have an introduction section coming up next. We'll talk about a few events that are coming up, and I know I've missed something in the events, so I'd like to be corrected.
I will correct you.
I'll be told what's missing once we get into it.
Yes.
Going back into some of the Windows related things that you need to be aware of in terms of upcoming changes. And then the main topic for today is if I say so myself, the creatively named The Not So Secret Life of MDE. Because I don't think people realize all the different things so just to be clear here, we're not talking about the core Defender for Endpoint things that you normally think of when you're talking about Defender for Endpoint. It's the other stuff it does behind the scenes where, like, the best way that I guess my best way of describing it is MDE in terms of the agent and sensor, etc., becoming plumbing. Now, sometimes people take offense when you say it's just plumbing, but I view it as a compliment because I would not like to live in a world without plumbing. Plumbing is one of the best inventions ever. So if a technology moves into the world of its plumbing, to me, that's a really good thing. And with MDE, there's, over time, there have been more and more things where it sits there behind the scenes and does things that, and integrates with other services that in some cases, like some of them are obvious ones that you've been dealing with for years. So you kind of already know probably the first few, but as we keep going through, I'm pretty sure there'll be at least one where you'll go, oh, I had no idea that it could do this kind of thing. And then after we go through that, that's where we'll jump into the just general discussion. Now, for anyone who hasn't joined before, we stop the recording once we finish the main topic, because we know that sometimes people want to discuss sensitive or work-related things in the general discussion section, and they don't necessarily want that being something that's recorded and ingested for future purposes. So basically, even related to any of the main content we're covering, if there's something that you want to ask but you don't want it to be recorded, just save it to the general discussion afterwards, and that way we can just sort of go through and talk about it in a way that's not going to be kept and maybe come back to haunt you in the future.
Does that include for me?
Everything haunts you in the future. Yeah. When was the last time you slept without nightmares?
2006.
Okay, so just quick, anyone who's new or maybe hasn't made an appearance for an extended time period, if you want to either unmute just to do a quick introduction, or if you want to drop an intro into chat, just to tell us a bit about who you are, where you are, what you are, what what part of this conversation is of most interest to you in terms of how it applies to your, I guess, your role, your interests, etc.
I'll start off. My name's Sasha. Been to Meetup group maybe before. This was earlier in the year, probably June, July. I work at a secondary school in Melbourne. So we use Intune and Autopilot and iPads as well. So yeah, I've just come join this meetup group because just wanted to understand and maybe pick your idea or brain about Wi-Fi and whether you can actually configure through Intune and enter an endpoint, whether you can configure policies to automatically add Wi-Fi because we're having that issue at the moment.
Yeah, we can definitely, so we can definitely park that one for the discussion at the end so that we can talk about stuff that's related to your environment without it, again, without it being something that's on the record anywhere.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah. So I'll go next. Again, myself, Vaishnav, almost 12 plus years of experience in IT industry. So currently handling the architecture and the SME background of Intune and SSCM. So I think from my end, I am already part of other communities, and I am a core team member of one of the famous endpoint management community in India, HDMD community, led by Anup Nair. So, and also I'm a tech blogger mentor who will be responsible for endpoint management, and even I'm concentrating on Windows 365 as well. So really excited to be joined with you guys today, and even I already saw some of the upcoming events also, so I already gave my RSP for that as well. And if any opportunity will be there, and I can able to deliver some content as well. Even I had a word with Mark yesterday, so I'm really happy to deliver content as well. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
New faces. That's
I think we should make Quack introduce himself. So he doesn't just sit there silently as per usual.
Mark's on to what?
Really? Really? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing this FY?
Because we know you, but not everyone else does.
What am I doing this FY? That's a good question. I'm trying to stay employed for another 12 months and hopefully I don't get riffed. I don't know.
That, my friend, is a noble goal.
Yes.
Oh, I know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out which 3 days a week I'm going to come back into the office now that it's mandated.
Pick ones that end in day.
Yep.
That was a good intro.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone
You want a
else?
serious intro though, or like, are you just pulling my leg?
Yeah. No. I'm actually, for once, I'm being serious.
Oh, okay.
Sort of.
All right. But I might as well put the camera on, I guess. So yeah, I'm based in Sydney, but I'm currently not in Sydney right now. But I'm based in Sydney. I'm part of the product group, so similar to Stephen Hoskins, as a product manager. I'm part of a team within engineering called Customer Experience Engineering, which Steve used to be in before his product area got reorged. And my focus area is anything to do with management. So UEM is the team, but Intune would be the product. Somewhat config manager, but probably not so much because we're cloud first. And probably to your question, Mark, what am I doing these days is trying to figure out how AI can help expand adoption of our services, probably more around mid-market and the smaller segments where when you have an enterprise solution that is very complex and there's a lot of configuration and bits, it can be quite overwhelming, right? And so how do we make it easier to bring AI into that, whether it's agents, whether it's side chats, whether it's vibe coding, whatever it may be. So yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. And hopefully we get to actually seeing that we live in the same city. Hopefully, we have that once. Yeah, once
Hopefully, probably next month
up.
I'll come in the office. Yeah. It'll be one of those 3 days a week. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure if Steve ran down to try to let somebody in or not. But if anyone else just wants to do a quick intro, if it's your first time attending, if you don't want to unmute and you just want to drop comment into chat, that's very, very acceptable as well. Seeing anyone else jump in. Okay, so
No one.
with that,
No one.
yeah. So with that, let's jump on in and just talk about some of the upcoming events. So next month, there are 2 different Workplace Ninjas events taking place, one in Sydney, one in Melbourne. Now, I guess the Sydney one would be just before. I think our event next month would be would be the Wednesday prior.
There is
To
one
the
more
10th?
event before that. I think the cloud endpoint one. Scott Manchester is coming in.
Oh, okay. When's that? Oh, we'll wait.
Yeah, but Steve has I've registered. I've forgotten which day it is now.
Okay. Okay, so if you're in Sydney or Melbourne, then come along to one of these. And I don't know if anyone from Device C. Oh, hey, how are you?
Sorry about that.
No, no problem. In here today, but
No, we don't.
okay, so yeah, so with this, yeah, make sure you check it out on Meetup, see if the topics and the timing work for you. And I assume the Sydney one is in here.
Yes. So we're just in the process of getting call for papers done for this. If you're interested in talking about it, make sure you go and sign up and send us an email because we're keen to have people talk. We do have a lot of sessions for Windows 365 AVD already. Any other topics? Welcome.
I got to know about that. The luckily, so if anyone's interested, it seems like product managers are gonna speak on
Yes.
the workspace one in
Oh, good.
Australia.
Yeah,
So
Workplace Ninja, not Workspace One.
Yeah.
Yes.
You are forgetting the Workplace Ninja Summit in Switzerland.
Correct.
Too
but
far.
I think that this audience is not likely to be going to Workplace Ninja Summit because it's expensive and a long flight and tickets are sold out.
Yes. Okay, and the other big one coming up in November is Ignite. So remember, the important thing when you've got something like Ignite coming up, and I think we mentioned it last month, is if somebody asks you, do you know when a certain feature is being announced or released? All you have to just say is something along the lines of, oh, they might talk about it at Ignite. So don't say they will talk about it because that will get you in trouble. Say they might talk about it. You're not making a commitment. You're just letting the other person make an assumption that you're making a commitment.
If I was a betting man,
Yeah.
I would assume that you're going to hear something about this in November.
Yes. Yeah. And as much as we joke about that, it's, a lot of the time the big announcements are, they do tend to bundle a lot of them around Ignite. So even though a lot of the things that they announce, they are just announcements, it's here's what's coming, here's what's in the pipeline. That's generally when you get a pretty good indication of what is going to be hitting GA probably, within the following 6 months or so. Then you've got Build, where there'll be a bunch of other announcements that fill the next 6 months. So so Build and Ignite are basically the, I want to call them the announcement engines, but they're a lot more than announcement engines. Yeah.
it's all new features.
I'm not going to go anywhere near that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think, Steve, the Scott Manchester one event is when? If you can if you can just
It's the
tell them
16th and the 18th. So 16th in Melbourne, 18th in Sydney.
18th
September. So next
18th
week.
September. Next week,
Yeah. If
there's a big event happening. Registrations were open, and I did receive there's quite a few registrations coming. Luckily, I got accepted, but
I'm
If
on the
not-
wait list.
pardon?
I'm on the wait list.
Are you on the wait list? Are you kidding me? Okay, yeah. So it's a big event. I think you get to meet Scott and the local Australia team for Windows 365 and everything else.
Can you meet the Stephen? Do you get to meet him? Shake his hand?
Like, he's on the wait list. I'm surprised.
Okay, yeah. So with that, let's just jump in and go through a few things. Now, I've decided that for the recent and upcoming changes, I want to have like a carryover champ from the previous month. So what was the thing that there was the least awareness of that's kind of critical for people to be aware of? So the returning champion from last month, because most people weren't aware of this, is that there are, so basically for your UFI system, or I guess we probably don't even need to say UFI systems anymore, because if they're biased, you've been in trouble forever.
If they're all together.
Yeah. So there'll be certain types of devices from certain vendors, or maybe it affects the servers that you're still managing where you're not actively patching the firmware on them, whether it's because you've traditionally followed we don't update the firmware unless we need to update the firmware. Well, we are now in a you need to update the firmware situation. And some of the things like there are things that I can imagine that are going to go wrong here, where people who have never updated firmware, or their firmware on some of these things is so old that people may have to jump through several versions of firmware to get to the current supported version. So I think there'll be a bit of fun with that, but hopefully, like as far as your, the fleet of devices that you manage, hopefully they all just get their firmware updates, through Windows Update for Business or whatever your OEM management tools are, if you're using that instead. Doesn't matter which one you use, just get firmware up to date on those devices. Okay, now the next one is one that I think is going to be important for some customers, but looking here at just some of the things here where we're talking about, Windows 10 going end of support, etc. That you will be able to run, Windows 10 past official end of support with the extended security updates as part of, running it on top of Windows 365. I know that there's always going to be that element that says, oh, Microsoft is encouraging this. And it's like, no, they are not. They are allowing it.
I believe the term is tolerating.
Yeah, tolerating might be a good answer. But it's just one of those things where we get into that. Yeah, it's whenever there's like something major that reaches end of support, like we know that there are going to be people who continue running things way past that, etc. And I think even if we jump into let's just go through some of the main points, and there's some other stuff on the other slide. So here, some of the important stuff is you'll be able to provision 22H2 gallery images up to April 14. Then they won't be available. Now, does that mean that you won't be able to deploy your own Windows 10 images?
Who's to say?
So let's jump to the next slide and
Do you bet on that?
see what they say. So if you need to continue using Windows 10 after April 14, 2026, basically that way you can go through and keep going until the official end of support, but you're not going to have the core images. So any of the things like your Teams optimizations, pre-installing the desktop apps, etc., that would be completely your responsibility at that point. But this is, I guess here, because we're talking about it being virtual machines running in Microsoft's environment, what would be the thing, like what are the apps or whatever, what would be the use case scenarios for staying on Windows 10 when we don't have hardware capabilities being the issue? Is there anything? Yeah. So it's going to be whatever apps.
So from a compatibility point of view, you're looking at a 99.95% of applications that run on Windows 10 run on Windows 11 without any changes. They just work.
Yep.
And if you don't, go through Azure.
Yes, that's correct. So in this scenario, typically what you'll see is for customers that have no pathway to a supported application on Windows 11 because the vendor doesn't exist, they don't know the source code, blah, blah, blah. And they're working towards how do they move off that application. But also, it's a good route to have your backup platforms to do hybrid Win 10 for the error that you aren't expecting. But honestly, you shouldn't need it.
Agreed.
It's business process.
Like show of hands in the audience. If at all anyone has provisioned a Windows 365 with Windows 10,
Recently.
Oh, recently.
that's for testing.
Yeah.
Not like
I haven't done it.
okay, yeah, Vaishnav. Vaishnav, you have customers running Windows 10?
Or do you enjoy
Yeah, because I think we do have support till October 14th, but I think as per your update, it will still continue to support after that period as well, right? So that's the new update I just got right now. So we are kind of migrating again, creating a new gallery image to upgrade the operating system to Windows 10 to Windows 11 at least, Windows 11 24 at least. So that's plan is going on.
I'm curious, my question was specific to Windows 365. You're referring Windows 365, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cloud PCs, Windows 365 cloud PCs. Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to understand what's taking so long, because why I'm saying is that physical devices, it's still a big strategy to go and update, but in Windows 365, it's so easy to upgrade. On a weekend, you could have bumped everything on Windows 11.
Yeah.
Just over a weekend. Unless application, what Steve was mentioning, some application is stopping someone.
But even then, I mean, what applications? It'd have to be like in-house.
it'd be such an edge case.
Yeah.
Edge case, super edge.
I'm not going to dive into this conversation being recorded. But suffice to say, technology is not typically the reason why customers are staying on Windows 10 today.
100%. Bureaucracy.
What do you mean feature updates get rolled out? We have to spend 5 years planning for a feature update.
I think Aaron has very interesting comments.
I've picked up. We've all had variations of that conversation with people, unfortunately. Unfortunately, it's not all this. If it was just the one person that we've all encountered, that would be okay, but it's not the same person, which makes it worse.
So recently we've had customers reporting that their Windows 11 projects have been defunded.
Oh,
And it's like, oh, that's cool.
what are those orgs that need big hardware refreshes? Because obviously the only
Not necessarily.
So it's just people-based, you're saying?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Some of them are regulated organizations too.
Oh, wow.
they're just going to cop the cost.
Well, the security updates is not supported. So this is where the conversation comes down to, if in a regulated industry, can you actually go ESU or...
Hey, that's true, right? Yeah. It's like in support hardware and all that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the conversations that are having to be had. But that's okay. As I said, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole completely while I'm being recorded.
Got it.
While you're being recorded. Okay, so with this one, we know what happens whenever, like, end of XP, end of Win 7. It's like at some point in the future, there'll be whatever the next Windows is. People will be complaining that Windows 11 is the best version of Windows ever. Why are you
100%.
making
Yeah.
me move to something else?
Every time.
It's almost like you could look at the patterns and look at the articles and the complaints that people have on a release by release cycle and see that the world really does run in cycles.
Mhm.
Guess what? There's going to be a bit of software or hardware that you're running today that's not compatible with a version of
Oh
Windows in
my
the future.
gosh.
In 10
I'm
years.
telling you that now. That's my prediction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's going to
Anyway.
be a big story.
Anyway.
It's a big story.
I'm going to.
He's got a point.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to move us on and let's talk about Windows backup
Yes.
optimizations now. Oh, sorry, you're on.
Yeah. Can we skip this slide, please? Because it's nonsense, I think.
Now, Steve
Well,
wanted us to move to this slide.
I was
But,
just wanting to move the topic on.
This was just renamed, wasn't it?
No.
Because like we already synced most of those settings.
Yep.
Cool. I mean, yeah.
Yep. I'm happy to continue in moving forward.
Yep,
If
okay.
you would like, but
Is this
I
like a
have
big
a-
thing people are pushing, or
I think it's only
Relatively
gone-
benign.
It's only just gone GA.
yeah?
Yeah.
Anyone uses it?
No.
Yeah.
No one
There's
is
customers
using it.
using it. There's customers using it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, customers, at least two. At least one person from two different customers is using it.
Do they even know they're using it? Found a button.
Okay, so let's move on to the main topic. So as I mentioned at the start, the idea behind this is just more of a raising awareness around some of the different things that MDE does behind the scenes that aren't always obvious, but also can help to explain why certain things happen in some cases, but not in others. Now, I guess one of the things I didn't put this on a slide, but one of the important starting points here is just assume that whatever we're talking about here requires Defender for Endpoint P2. Because sometimes the documentation can be hard to decipher because you'll see a lot of references to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but that is not a product. That is a family of three different products, each with different capabilities. So generally speaking, here if there are any situations where I know for sure that like what business and P1 do offer instead, but because most of the time, like I'm working in E5 environments, I've made the mistake several times of assuming that, well, that's how it works here. Surely that's how it works elsewhere. But oh no. And it's not just the Defender for Endpoint like business P1, P2. It's also what versions of the other things are you connecting into? So do you have a standalone component or are you using Defender XDR? So as soon as you start merging different components together, all of a sudden the story changes even more. So unfortunately, there's no table at the end of this for you to memorize to understand what versions are required. So let's just work on the assumption that P2 will make everyone happy. Now,
everyone.
Except for the people paying the bill, I promise. They are not happy. They're hard to convince. Well, not for me at the moment, but small org.
They're just confused.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, they're not
temporarily.
unhappy. Yeah.
They're not there yet.
Okay, so what are the things that we will discuss? So we'll talk about we'll be focused on what's happening on devices that you manage in terms of sensors and agents, etc. We'll be focused on Windows client and server. So there are some things here that we'll talk about that probably, like even though technically don't require server, there are some licensing elements that actually do indicate that server is required in some cases. Now, things that we won't be discussing, we're actually going to be talking about Defender for Endpoint. That's not the topic. It's what Defender for Endpoint integrates with. So we're not going to be talking about the core features of Defender, endpoint itself. We're not going to talk about here what I mean by under the hood service usage, like not talking about how Microsoft uses it to scan like Exchange Online servers or what they're doing, like using it in their core architecture or things like that. There is a little bit of that, though, that does get exposed a bit once you start talking about Defender for Cloud. There's a bunch of, what's going on here that's happening beneath the covers that doesn't actually require sensors or agents and just part of the vulnerability management side of things. And for this session, we're not going to bring other OSs into it. Just for this one, it's just sort of trying to keep it a bit simpler, keeping it focused on the Windows side more than anything else, rather than trying to dilute it and cover too many things all in one session. So the things that we will talk about here, what I've tried to do here is structure it in a way that I was trying to sort of come up with a list in order of what would be the integrations that people are most, or that this audience would generally be most familiar with. And of course, I know that this isn't going to match everyone, but I will declare that it's close enough that we could probably move a few of the things around a little bit. But overall, I think the Intune integration is obviously something we're aware of, integration into conditional access policies, etc. But then as we work our way through that list, and especially once we get down to Purview and Defender for Cloud, there are some things there that are obvious, but some other things that aren't very obvious until you're forced to look at them. And there's some pretty cool stuff sitting under the covers there. So let's start off with the easy one. So Intune. Now, actually, I realized this slide's got a mistake on it. Pretend the second two bullet points aren't on here. You're imagining that. So I guess the first one is just that onboarding integration. So yeah, nice, simple one. I'm sure everyone.
Radio button based.
Yeah, radio button, turn it on, integrate. Now, just as a compare and contrast with this, I'm sure some of you are like me and you've, as a reminder, you've kept the old OMA URI policies that you had to, where you had to drop in the, basically it was like the analytics workspace that your logs were getting sent to for analysis that associated with your tenant. You actually had to do that as a manual OMA URI custom policy before that integration came into play. So just a little reminder of when you have some of those things, they eventually, or I guess now they get rolled into settings catalog pretty damn quickly these days, versus waiting for it to become a radio button like this. So this is basically the main one here is that, okay, it's actually enabled and it's syncing, and you can, if you're in the US, this slide is from the future. If you're from the rest of the world, well, that's from earlier today.
Raining in the future.
Okay, now the next one is, this is where things start to get more interesting, because a lot of people don't realize this side of things, because so even if it's someone who's been using Intune, but they've also been using Defender for Endpoint, they don't necessarily realize that you can use your Defender for Endpoint signals as in terms of, what risk level is the device at, as something that goes into a compliance policy here. So this is a nice, simple one. Now, in this case, this is one where I didn't actually dig into this one to see. I don't think this one would be a P2 only. I think getting the compliance information seems to be something that should be lower, but we can, if anyone knows the answer, can find a link to it, just drop it into chat. But in this case, it's something where it's pretty simple to go through and configure it. You just add it in to a compliance policy, and then it's basically the risk or the score that you're getting over in Defender for Endpoint now plays a role in here as well. And one of the things that I find with this is that sometimes this is the bit that people miss when they're seeing something somewhere that tells them that they can use Defender for Endpoint signals in Entra ID. And they're like, well, where do I get that? And this is how it's via Intune, but we'll talk about that separately in just a few minutes. Now, the other thing that I've put into here is sometimes you get into a situation where it appears to be an Intune versus NDE. conversation, because there are certain settings or things you can target through both. So I'd rather call it plus MDE than versus, because it really is going to depend on what it is you're going to target. So if you're targeting servers, you're not going to be using Intune for that. If you're trying to...
No, you can.
Use what?
You can do the server target.
Oh, now,
Defender
yeah,
in Intune.
So now pushing out things like your basically some of your different protection profiles, etc., being able to push them out this way is probably, when was this? Like a year and a half ago? Some of this stuff started to...
I want to say 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That'd be a good time frame, Flock.
Yeah.
Right. I know you're definitely paying attention.
Yeah, it was around just before Scott moved back to Australia.
Yeah.
Because he was the one that owned it.
I thought you were about to say just before COVID, just to make
No.
just so that we're going, okay, that was definitely more than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's something where like questions will come up. Where should you configure it? I guess it depends on what's your role. Can it be, do you have the ability to do it in both places? Does one of them, does Intune give you more granularity than what you're getting over on the MDE side, things like that? So it's not, so there, as I mentioned, don't really think of it as versus, think of it as what's the right thing to use. So if someone doesn't have Intune in use, but they are using Defender for Endpoint on their servers and some of like their group policy managed devices, etc., then that would be one way that you could get that stuff out to the devices.
That's funny, but yeah, I've personally only ever used it with Intune. I've never had a client that only had Defender.
Yeah.
And
and I guess for this audience, that would be the norm, because you probably started off with Intune, and it wasn't until Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Business or whatever became part of whatever suite you started using.
It becomes economic. Right?
You
may it'd be silly not to.
Yeah, and probably like for me, probably the main things that I'm sort of thinking of here are things like your attack surface reduction rules would be something where, like, I think even in the portals, I think it will show you what's configured on the other side. So it's not like they're completely abstracted or removed from each other. You can see that they are working together in there. Okay, so starting off with the simple, we'll keep going through. I guess this is the final of the simpler ones that most people are probably aware of. Now this is that extension of the Defender for Endpoint signals going into Intune, and then your Intune signals coming into Entra ID for device compliance. So one of the things that's probably just worth mentioning quickly around this is when you hover over that little information icon next to what I've got checkboxed, there's an incredibly important word in there, Intune. And this is something that I've seen catch people out over the years, because they'll see Intune, and in a lot of other general Microsoft documentation, you'll see Intune, and then maybe in brackets, or another third-party MDM solution. In this case, it's Intune. If you're saying I'm using a third-party MDM solution, it's like, okay, we'll get your compliance info into Intune. How do I do that? Start by getting Intune licenses for all those devices. At which point they're like, well, at that point I might as well just use Intune. And you go, correct. That's right. Very smart. I'm glad you came to that conclusion on your own. So that one. So this one just really ties up that the compliance policies part of that story. But we're not done with Entra ID just yet. This is where we start getting into the scratching your head until you can find an official source that actually confirms or denies what you're doing and explains why you've had hours of frustration trying to get something to work. Okay, so this one. And I'm not saying that this is something that drove me crazy firsthand or not, but it did. And this is where one of the things that you get with your Entra ID P1, P2 licensing is Cloud App Discovery. But the Cloud App Discovery is only valid in this case when you're pumping in continuous reports from your proxy, your firewall, or whatever, or you're doing snapshot report ingestion. So any of you who let me switch over just so we can look at it. It's probably just better to explain it in here. Yeah, so Cloud Discovery. So here what you'll see is that I've got this configured to be ingesting directly from Defender for Endpoint. But if you don't have Defender for Endpoint P2, I think that's where this starts becoming a P2 feature. So some of the and this is where I started running into some of the documentation being a bit vague, saying you need Defender for Endpoint. And it's like, okay, that was a valid thing to say 3 or 4 years ago because there was only one Defender for Endpoint, whereas now you've got 3, actually you've got 2 plus a sibling. So in this case, the thing that you're not going to get is that signal coming in around Cloud App Discovery or your SaaS apps being discovered via basically the info that's coming back up from the Defender for Endpoint client. So instead, what you'd have to rely on, as I mentioned, is bringing in things like snapshots. So in this case, if we switch over here to a snapshot report that I've ingested into here for a little company you might have heard of called Guntoso. They make things. They make many different things at many different times. So in this case, this is basically like a CSV file that I've imported to be able to get that in there. So you'd either have to do the manual occasional ingestion, or alternatively, the other option that you've got in here that I mentioned is the continuous reports, where you could go through, and if we take a look on here, that's where we've basically got, we're deploying there's a Microsoft provided Linux VM that you're running that's basically pulling in your log files and then pushing them over to Defender for Cloud Apps as a stream. So this is, so this one is something where just be a bit careful with some of the wording and some of the stuff you read about Cloud App Discovery in general, because even if you look at I think even if you sort of go to the Entra ID Cloud App Discovery feature page or capabilities page in Microsoft Learn, if you're not careful and you're not reading different paragraphs before you continue on, you have quickly gone from the free Cloud App Discovery capability into a Defender for Cloud conversation. So just be careful with that one, because the other things that then they'll start talking about is, if we just jump back over here, if you start seeing something where you're thinking you're just seeing Cloud App Discovery, but then all of a sudden they're talking about sanctioned and unsanctioned apps, that is not a Cloud App Discovery conversation. That's a Defender for Cloud Apps conversation. So this is the one that, in terms of what you need on the client side, what you need on the service side, has got a bit more of a complicated matrix. But just having Entra ID P1 will give you the Cloud App Discovery, will show you the usage, will show you the different users who are using those services. You get the same. Actually, let me pull something up here. Let's see if I can get this page open. Yeah, so this is where you can start seeing where some of the confusion can come in, because they're talking about Cloud App Discovery. They're talking about Entra ID P1, then they're talking about EMS, then they're talking about M365. But in this case, they do start off by telling you that it's a subset of Defender for Cloud Apps. But then it's not until you start looking more closely that you can start seeing, okay, well, Cloud App Discovery does some things, but it is a much smaller subset. Once we start going down that list, so things like integration with Purview DLP, information protection, sanctioning and unsanctioning apps, etc. Cloud App Discovery on its own doesn't provide that. So just be careful here, because even though this is talking about Entra Cloud App Discovery, they're really using this as the opportunity to promote what Defender for Cloud Apps does. And there'll be a lot of people, let's say, they'll zoom in on the screen and maybe this bit isn't on screen. They just look at this column and they think these are all the capabilities that they get. But as I mentioned, things like that Defender for Endpoint integration. So even here, notice that it's not being too specific about which Defender for Endpoint you need. So that's what I mean by there's a lot of these little situations where you'll see just a generic reference that if that text hasn't been updated since before P1 and Defender for Business were announced, like that might explicitly mean P2 in some cases. In other cases, it could be the family. So yeah, lots of fun there. Okay, so let's just go back over to the slide there. So I think we've spoken about most of what's on the slide. So yeah, so just the Cloud App Discovery via Entra ID doesn't support Defender for Endpoint continuous reporting and the manual and automatic log uploading from your network appliances, but also the you're not getting that one-click sanction, unsanctioned, etc. of Defender for Cloud App stuff. But we'll jump into more of the Defender for Cloud Apps specific stuff a bit later. This one is just to highlight that this is not, as we can see it, is not a Defender for Endpoint enhanced capability. that comes later. Okay. Oh, it comes right here. Okay. So when we take a look at Defender for Cloud Apps, then it carries over that Cloud App Discovery piece. But as we saw, when we do have Defender for Endpoint, then we do get that option for using basically our signals from Defender for Endpoint to be reporting back through. Now, going back probably 10 years ago now, there used to be a standalone app for Cloud App Discovery for Windows devices, but that's long gone. So this is a good example of what would have been multiple agents or sensors, etc., down on the device, now becoming a unified one. Now, some of the things that we can now do with this integration, once we've got Defender for Cloud Apps, one of the nice things that we can then start doing is use the Defender for Endpoint updates that the clients receive to push down the sanctioned and unsanctioned SaaS apps. So if we switch back over to the browser, now I was foolish enough to try to set this up and just have it running in the background all the time with Dropbox. I do not recommend that. You will quickly find out how many things you download come from Dropbox if you try to block access to Dropbox. Whereas Box doesn't seem to have that same level of
with the same thing doing URL filtering. When you just it blows up your saw, it's just like sort of dies a bit.
Yeah, and in this case, like if we jump back over to Cloud Apps and if we just take a look at the Cloud App catalog, and I'll just do a search for Box here.
The same with websites that have a ton of banner ads.
Yes.
And they just host them on random services, and you just
And so let me just zoom in a bit here. So you can see here that Box is the one that I've got marked as unsanctioned. If I just click on that, some of the things that you'll hear when people talk about the sanctioning and unsanctioning is it's a single click. So if I want to mark that as sanctioned, there we go. It's now a sanctioned app. I give it a few minutes. I'd need to be I'd need to get an update from Defender for Endpoint to alert me to that. But again, one agent, one update process that's pulling these things down. And then just to go back to unsanctioned. Now, in this case, I won't choose profiles or excluding certain groups from being blocked. I just want this to be a blanket ban in this case so that it works for whatever account I'm using in this tenant. So that one is, so just be careful if you think you're reading about Cloud App Discovery, but they're talking about this specific functionality, you are way beyond Cloud App Discovery and well into Defender for Cloud Apps territory with that one. Now, the next one. Everyone's favorite, Defender for Identity, because everyone loves their on-prem domain controllers.
No, I have on-prem domain controllers.
Somebody
You got
does.
so many. We have so many.
Now, okay, so rather than just sort of telling you that if we've got Defender for Endpoint on a domain controller and that domain controller doesn't have Defender for Identity, we could have Defender for Endpoint auto-enroll the device, get it the Defender for Identity sensors onto it. But let's talk about a bigger picture. What if we want to get that into that DC into Arc in Azure so we can manage it through there? Well, if we install the Azure Arc agent, that will install Azure Monitor agent, which will install Defender for Endpoint, which will then install the Defender for Identity sensor for you. Wow.
Yeah. We're moving at the moment to Defender for Server. And initially the route was go via Arc.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the one who did it, but the people who did it had many calls with Microsoft. We are just, because we have a mix of internet accessible, others that aren't, we have proxies on-prem now and all that. We are using a file share to give definitions out now, and we're just keeping them all in SCCM because Arc was not viable, supposedly, in our way. Or it wasn't as pleasant as maybe we were led to believe with our configuration.
Yeah, like so overall, if we
I'm going to say,
yeah, I'd say in a lot of cases we could probably put Defender for Identity and Arc into a similar conversation around things that just don't have broad awareness out there.
Mhm.
They're things that people tend to like, unless you've got fairly specialized role, or with Arc, if you're that the person we were referring to earlier who doesn't like change and only allows it in can only cope with it in very small doses. Arc would be something that they'd be interested in because it means that they get to keep stuff on-prem. But with Defender for Identity, I think if you did a random poll of IT pros and asked what does Defender for Identity protect, well, if they knew it was from Microsoft, they'd say your Entra ID accounts.
I would say your identity. And that's where
Yeah. Wouldn't get any further than that. Yeah. So with this one, it's like you don't have to use this automatic activation of DCs because obviously some orgs don't want all of their DCs immediately being onboarded. You can still pick and choose, target the ones that you want. Now, I think one of the other things in here, I think it's actually mentioned on the slide, but can I actually say, let's just zoom in. Where's my little, if we take a look in there. So basically this is only for DCs running server 2019 and above. And it hurts me to say this, but in my mind, I know that that's a tiny percentage of the DCs that are out there. Like I wish I could say, oh yeah, 2019 and above, that gives us 2019, 2022, 2025. Yeah, that's the majority.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking about all of it, trying to count in my head all the 2016s we got.
Yeah.
Same year. Like,
So 2016 is an extended support. It's
it's going to be around.
now it's a year and a half.
Yeah, 2027 it ends.
Yes.
Yeah. So still
Jan
a year and
27.
a half to go.
So start planning to get off it now.
Yes, agreed. Strategy has to be now.
Yes.
So I think so this is probably like out of the ones we've covered so far, I'd say this is probably the one that most people are unaware of because most people, so if you sort of think about the market in terms of like if you're like, let's say you work for a CSP or a partner, or you're not working for a large mid-market or enterprise, there's a pretty good chance that you either have or are in the process of decommissioning AD in a lot of those environments. So adding additional services for something you're decommissioning, probably not a big deal. So there's a huge chunk of the market that just don't even know what Defender for Identity is. And that's not saying that's not a bad thing. It's just if it's not relevant for them, there's not really that much of a need to actually know about it. Now, as we get into Purview, probably the easy one we can start off with is the onboarding. So the onboarding.
You run the local script on every computer.
Yes, because you can't assume that people know Config Manager, Intune, other MDM solutions.
That's what you're telling me with
No, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, you've already got the devices onboarded because they're already in.
Intune.
They're already Intune onboarded. But in this case though, it's something where if you were in a situation where you wanted to use Endpoint DLP from Purview, but you didn't have Defender for Endpoint, basically you're still doing the same enrollment process. Now, again, that's not a scenario that I could see a large. I'd view that more as an edge case scenario. Probably not as edge as I'd like once you get it up to large enterprises who like to pick and choose every single thing to make sure they've got maximum incompatibility in there.
I don't have any customers like that.
No, I'm absolutely sure you don't. But in this case, the thing that I couldn't get a screenshot of because I've already got the integration turned on here is that if you haven't enabled Endpoint DLP and it sees that you do have the device, you've already enabled Defender for Endpoint, it will just say, hey, do you want to add all your Defender for Endpoint devices? And you just say, well, assuming that they're all licensed for Endpoint DLP, then just say yes. So that's a nice, easy one. And this is, but one of the things that's kind of funny is this is a screenshot from today. Now, when I say kind of funny, I don't actually mean ha-ha funny. So even though, like at first glance, you think, oh, they're actually just lifting the UI from Defender for Endpoint onboarding. Because the Defender for Endpoint says Windows 10/Windows 11 there in the, or that, that's actually a drop down. It's not obvious from that. So it's
no, it's drop down. It's select 11 and it's fine. It's not a major issue.
Oh no, it just, there's a lot of places where
we've got them years to clean it up, Mark. 3 years. Hey, that's
let me just
still relevant
quickly here.
Heck, if you look in the Intune portal, we'll still have Windows 8.1 in there and Windows 8 compliance policies.
Let me just check to see if this has been cleaned up.
That's for all the people upgrading from Windows 7, isn't it? So that they can get onto something more modern. Sort of.
Sorry, just working against the projector here with all the main screen, and there's just a little bit of lag if you're wondering why mouse movements aren't as fluid as they should be. Good. It doesn't say Azure ATP anymore. That's what it set up until fairly recently. That's actually good.
It doesn't have the new Intune logo though.
No, but all the product names actually look like they're up to date.
No, Power BI. Not Power BI anymore. It's Flow, isn't it?
No, that's Power Automate.
No, Power BI got changed to something else. Power BI hasn't. But you mean I thought it did. No, I know what you're talking about. The basic license, the basic product was changed. Yeah, I think it is Flow.
Flow? But that's different. Yeah, Flow became Power Automate. Because in Power Automate, you now have cloud flows, right, as opposed to just having flows.
Flows, that's right.
Oh, no, I still call Power BI there, but okay. I don't know what's going on. Fabric. Yes. We had this. It happened. I'm like, where's the Power BI free license?
Yeah, so this one had, for an extended time period, this one had several really, really, really old product names. I think it still had like Windows Defender ATP in there up until about a year ago. But it happens.
At least it's not Yammer anymore. No. Beaver engaged.
Yeah. And everyone noticed.
Yeah.
They yammered about it. Okay. So yes, on the Purview side, the onboarding, nice and easy, using processes that we already know, and that we basically just got to enable integration if we don't have or if we do already have that Defender for Endpoint config turned on. Now, one of the things where there has been a decoupling, not a conscious uncoupling, that's a very different thing. So initially, the endpoint DLP process was basically it was running in the same exe as the Defender for Endpoint exe. They got split out just over a year ago, and the reasoning for it makes sense. Because they were saying that for things like troubleshooting purposes, stability, performance, etc., it was better to have the two different exes that they could basically put them on different update paths, roll out features at a cadence that met that team's requirements, as opposed to going, oh, we missed the window for the Defender team, so now we've got to wait another X number of months or whatever. However, so even though it has split off in here, it still leverages the Defender for Endpoint update engine. So basically your DLP policy updates are still coming down through that mechanism. Now, I guess some of the things that could have impacted people around this is if you're working in an org where you're being very careful around what services get outbound access to certain URLs and IP addresses and that kind of thing, you may have hit an issue where MP DLP service.exe was causing issues for you because you were blocking it on your, let's not use the word block, you are not allowing it. You've got to use positive framing, not negative framing.
It was not on the guest list.
Yes. But otherwise, like that would not have been a big issue, because first of all, if we think of endpoint DLP is only available in M365 E5 or E5 compliance add-on type SKUs. So that's a subset of the M365 customer base. And then people also have to actually use it, which shrinks it down even further. So overall, the impact would have been, if people didn't get the notifications to be, anyone who was using it, who was licensed for it, they would have been told through announcements, etc. Hey, you need to make sure that this stuff is opened up. But otherwise, it's nothing too. I can't really think of any real, I guess the downside that someone could say is it's two services, it's not one service any longer. And it's like, you got me, you win. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Here's your $200. Okay, so let's move on to where things start getting a lot more fun. And I'm not joking. Inside of Defender for Cloud. Now, there's actually quite a few places inside of Defender for Cloud where Defender for Endpoint may or may not be used that isn't really disclosed as far as I'm aware, which is when you start looking at some of the CSPM and some of the underlying vulnerability management pieces. In terms of what's running inside your VMs, it's pretty easy. It's Defender for Endpoint. But what about stuff that's running outside of your VMs? Is it Defender for Endpoint? Now, if we go back to probably one of the first examples of this, if any of you are using Azure Container Registries, one of the things that you can get with Defender for Cloud in the Defender for Containers plans is vulnerability management scanning of your containers, because there'll be all of those things that cause problems that need to be updated in those images. And initially, Microsoft was using Qualys for that stuff, and not hiding the fact, even when you were using Defender for servers, you could choose, do you want to use Qualys? Or initially it was Qualys, and then so you're using Qualys for vulnerability detection, and then Defender for Endpoint was providing the real-time protection, etc. But basically, they're not offering the Qualys option anymore. It's Defender for Endpoint, including, so here, just that bit here, the Defender vulnerability management, whereas previously you had initially it was Qualys, then you had a period where you could choose one or the other. And then maybe a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, because time is hard to track, Microsoft announced that, the Qualys stuff was getting removed. Now, one of the things that we'll get down here is these things here: agentless VM vulnerability scanning, agentless VM secret scanning, and agentless malware detection. So people will interpret those in different ways, depending on whether they had exposure to the Azure Container Registry scanning. So if you already knew how the Azure Container Registry scanning worked, which was storage gets scanned, pretty easy. Guess what's happening here? Storage gets scanned. So things like your disk snapshots, etc., are getting scanned. So that way, those scans that are taking place aren't impacting the performance of the VM. So the same way that, like, any of you who've used things like Azure Backup, where or Azure Backup on Azure VMs, where the backup is actually taking place from disk snapshots, not from your actual storage. So there's no performance penalty there for you. So basically a similar thing here. However, where people start coming up with ideas that sound like they could be real is, so does this mean that somewhere in the management plane or the control plane that, like, is there some kind of like real-time scanning outside of the VM, of the VM's memory, all that kind of thing? And it's like, no, anything real-time in the VM is in the VM. That's still Defender for Endpoint. So it doesn't mean agentless. It's not an agentless solution. It's talking about agentless scanning of certain things. So that's one where I think there's obviously a lot of potential for confusion around that one. But this is where you're not going to find. I haven't seen anything that confirms that the thing that's actually doing that vulnerability scanning is Defender for Endpoint or some very internal variation of it. I'm not going to say it's a safe assumption, because you just never really know what's going on. It could be something completely custom that's 100% abstracted from Defender for Endpoint.
And is that just running on like the Microsoft hosted host?
Yeah, basically.
On, right?
Yeah. Okay, so then before we get into the Defender for Servers pieces that I want to dig into a bit further, when you look at the P1 versus P2 option here, both of them give you Defender for Endpoint. So I've just highlighted Plan 1. Even though it's the one with fewer features, it's the better one to talk about here, because if I showed you Plan 2, it wouldn't be obvious what Plan 2 included that Plan 1 didn't include. But if I show you Plan 1, it shows you, basically at the top here, if you look at this stuff, is there, apart from the automatic agent onboarding, ignore that one. Actually, let's pretend that that's via Intune. That keeps a green tick there. But is there anything in those green ticks that isn't what you would say is Defender for Endpoint? That's basically Defender for Endpoint. So it's when you get down to the red sections, this is where some of these are things that might have a use outside of Azure, but a lot of these things are basically targeting Azure or other cloud providers.
I was about to say, how would I benefit from that? I couldn't implement that.
Because all you have to do is put on the how would Microsoft scan snapshots of my disks on my on-prem VMs? So similar, that would also apply to AWS, GCP, etc. But some of the things in here, such as the just-in-time VM access, I'm not sure about on GCP, but AWS has got basically the same feature, that if you've got their devices enrolled and you've integrated your AWS environment into Defender for Cloud, this functionality will work across AWS. But what would be involved to get something like that working against your on-prem VMs?
An agent, probably.
It's easy. Just GSA. Just GSA.
Yeah. And
global secure access.
So some of these
proxy. So GSA is the new wrapper for Azure Active Directory App Proxy.
Oh.
Now, other ones in here, we'll jump into file integrity monitoring in a moment. That's the one where some interesting stuff has happened very, very recently. But otherwise, this, I guess, log analytics, the free data ingestion. So this is 500 for each day, or basically every 24 hours that the VM is running. You're getting 500 meg of free data ingestion for security activity. So it's not, so if someone says, oh, can I apply it to metrics that are coming into a log analytics workspace or whatever, it's like, no, it's basically things going into certain known tables in a log analytics workspace, for example. Now, if we jump to the next slide, I think we've covered that, yeah. MDE replaced Qualys as the vulnerability management side. Now, I guess the other thing as well in here that I just wanted to talk about quickly is the build on an hourly basis. So here, if you've got VM, if you sort of think about the pricing benefits of this versus just sort of getting your monthly or annual plans for Defender for servers, there you're paying for that device for the entire month, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If these are VMs that are sort of powering on for a few hours a day to handle peak workloads, et cetera, you're paying next to nothing for them. Okay, so Defender for servers, file integrity monitoring. Now, this is something that's just moved away from using the log analytics / Microsoft Migration Assistant agent or Microsoft Monitoring agent, and is now moved over to using Defender for Endpoint. And let me just show this to you. Now, I should have actually fired this up yesterday, but I forgot. So we may not see results where we're supposed to see results yet, but we can still see some results in a roundabout way. Let me just hit refresh. We'll see if anything turns up. Okay, so nothing's being found in there. So just to show you where I've gotten into this, and then we can poke around and then we can jump in and take a look at the log analytics workspace behind it. So in file integrity monitoring, in the workload protection section, that will bring this UI up that we just saw. Then we can take a look at the settings and see that basically we can jump through, we can configure all of the different subs that we've got easily through here. Now, in this tenant, I've only got 2 VMs down.
Is that the film that I'm thinking?
No, this is another FIM.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not forefront FIM.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is not MIM, aka FIM. This is FIM.
It's not MIM, which
It's not MIM.
FIM
Yeah.
with a shim.
Yeah, this is FIM
Like
without MIM.
MIM.
Yes. Okay, so just in here, you can see we've got the 2 resources in here are 2 VMs. If we take a look at the settings here, you can see the log analytics workspace that it's been pointing at. Now, the thing to sort of note here is that what we're effectively doing here is creating a data collection rule without creating a data collection rule. So if you've worked with the Azure Monitor agent and you've had to go through and create DCRs, in this case, it actually gives us a suggested DCR. Because of the things that we're trying to monitor with file integrity monitoring, it will basically go through and populate that stuff for us. So let me just zoom in a bit so you can actually see some of it. But things like, registry locations, everyone's friend, autoexec.bat is in here. All that, and that's the one that whenever I want to trigger something, that's what I'll jump in and do, because it's easier to do that than to mess around with some of the other stuff in a lot of cases. But then also, on the Linux side,
Root.in is
no. Okay, so here for the file integrity monitoring, you can see I've basically set up that workspace for that. So if we jump down into the log analytics workspace so we can see this one. Now, the reason why we're not seeing anything in that report side is that I only remembered to start these VMs up this afternoon, and it does take a while for some of this stuff to start coming through once the VMs are powered up. But if we jump into the logs, and let's just grab Okay, yeah, PVM2 is okay. We're not going to get anything for that time frame, so let's just customize that, and we'll do
Took too long.
27. Okay, so here you can see the entries that were made for that. And if we poke around and actually see what these entries are, in this case, if we start scrolling down, you can basically see it's registry changes that were basically matching those requirements that come through in there. So it's, yeah, so in this case, it's easy enough to set up. Now here, I'll update this environment at some point soon. I just wanted to keep it simple and clean for now. But what I'll probably end up doing here is getting rid of this standalone log analytics workspace and just push this stuff straight into the Sentinel workspace. Like I'm not collecting enough data from these are two VMs that I power up occasionally after I get all the reports that they're horrifically out of date with updates. So I'll do it once a month so that I can generate traffic to get this. But I'll just push that straight into the Sentinel log analytics workspace. And yeah, it's not going to be anything that has a big impact on cost for two VMs. For thousands of VMs, yeah, you'd have to take your Sentinel ingestion costs into account. But in this case, it's not that big a deal. But here it's this is another one of those good examples of rather than these VMs having Defender for Endpoint installed and having either previously it would have been the log analytics workspace agent. Moving forward, it would have been the Azure Monitor agent. Just sort of trying to, wherever possible, trying to minimize the number of agents that you've got installed. And that's something that I think we still see situations today where there's like agents that when they're running on their own are fine. Like even if they're constantly consuming a couple of percent, it's not having too much of an issue. But as soon as you've got a handful of agents, each consuming a couple of percent, your battery life is going to start to suffer. Your performance is probably going to start to suffer overall in there as well. And so probably just I guess the final slide then, like going back over to that Defender for Servers, the agentless scanning piece here is, just to highlight and, take a look at one of the things that I was talking about here, which is that it's, as I mentioned, it's the disk snapshots that are being saved out there. Now, one of the things with this is I think they say that, the scanning of this occurs once every 24 hours. The thing that I'm not sure about though is it for each 24 hours the VM runs? Because normally in Defender for servers, everything is based around hourly charges. So I'm not sure if this is something that would be, it couldn't sit there and not scan just because you've shut the VMs out. To me, that would defeat the purpose. But it's just one of those things where you can see that we get the disk snapshot and then that vulnerability assessment is taking place here. But again, here notice that like when they're talking about the vulnerability assessment, even when you go through and take a look at the documentation, they're not saying anything about what the underlying assessment tool, what the scanning tool, etc., is. And while you might think, oh well, surely they must be using this or that.
Cares, right?
Weird stuff happens sometimes. Yeah.
To you, it's agentless.
Yeah. And it could even, even things here, if you think about what's going on under there, there could be some custom third-party vendor that Microsoft's engaged here who says we can scan.
It's CrowdStrike.
We can scan snapshots at 200 times the speed that Defender for Endpoint can. And Microsoft goes, well, why the hell would Defender for Endpoint want to scan snapshots? That's not what it's built for. So there is that potential that there could be something quite custom underneath it. And it could still be using, the Defender signatures, Microsoft's threat intelligence information, etc. But to say that if, without seeing actual proof, I'm reluctant to say that it's Defender for Endpoint as we know it. That's probably the best way of putting it.
Hmm.
Let's say I'm comfortable saying it's probably Defender for Endpoint adjacent. That gives me a lot of wiggle room because CrowdStrike is adjacent.
Well, of course.
And
Right?
Semantic and
Is it McAfee?
Trellix.
Sorry, Trellix.
Wasn't that a character of one of the Star Trek series, Trellix?
Have you had any pushback when people have asked, like, has anyone asked what the agentless scanning agent is?
Most people don't even know it exists.
Oh, no, 100%. I imagine the abstraction is
I'm
enough
sure
to keep people
people
happy.
have, but I don't talk to them about this.
Yeah, fair.
And I'm pretty sure I can be safe to say most people on this call would talk to customers about this.
No.
Yeah, and I guess where some of this stuff would potentially apply would be like your AVD environments. It's probably the place where some of the Defender for Cloud stuff would be most likely, because generally speaking, when you take a look at the Defender for Cloud stuff, there's a lot of explicit language in there, or at least in some of the services where they're saying this is for server operating systems. But then you'll see exclusions where they'll say, in AVD, Windows clients and Windows 10, 11 multi-session are supported as well. But in some cases, they are being quite explicit, saying this is not for general purpose end user compute usage. Yeah. Okay, so let's stop the recording there, and we can switch over to some of the general Q&A pieces, and